Timid CEO hires a young woman on a baby contract, uncovers her virginity, and finds true love. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready. Let's start. Alexander Hayes stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, his reflection a dark silhouette against the glittering Manhattan skyline. The golden hour cast long shadows across the polished marble floors, but the beauty of the sunset was lost on him. His mind churned with the conversation he'd had with his lawyers earlier that day. 6 months, Mr. Hayes, Warren had said, his weathered face grave. That's all the time we have before the inheritance clause activates. Without an heir, your father's amendment to the will gives Christopher everything. Christopher. The name alone made Alexander's jaw clench. His half-brother, the product of his father's affair, had spent years trying to weasel his way into Hayes Enterprises. Now, with this forgotten clause in his father's will surfacing, Christopher might finally succeed in taking everything Alexander had spent his life building. The soft chime of his intercom broke through his thoughts. "Your 7 o'clock is here, Mr. Hayes. Send her in." His voice was cool, controlled, the same tone he used in million-dollar negotiations. This was, after all, just another business transaction. Madeline Brooks entered with quiet confidence. Her navy blazer and pencil skirt, speaking of careful preparation for this meeting. Alexander turned, studying her with clinical detachment. Brown hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and her green eyes met his without flinching. Impressive, given the circumstances. "Please, sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. She moved with grace, settling into the chair while maintaining perfect posture, not the desperate type he'd expected when his team had presented her file. Single, 26, working 2 jobs to support a younger sister through college. On paper, she was the perfect candidate, intelligent, healthy, and most importantly, in need of the money he was offering. "I assume you've reviewed the contract." Alexander returned to his desk, noting how she tracked his movement without appearing to do so. "Yes." Her voice was clear, with a slight huskiness that caught him off guard. "Though, I have to admit, Mr. Hayes, when I applied to be a surrogate, I didn't expect to be meeting with the intended father directly. Usually, there are agencies, lawyers. I prefer to handle important matters personally." He opened a folder on his desk. "Your medical records are exemplary, and your background check came back clean. However, there are several additional clauses I need to discuss with you." Madeline's fingers tightened slightly on her purse, the only sign of tension she displayed. "Such as complete confidentiality. For one, no one can know about this arrangement, including your sister. The official story will be that you've accepted a position as my personal assistant, which will explain your presence in my life during the pregnancy." "I see." She paused, considering. "And the method of conception." Alexander kept his expression neutral, though something in her tone made him look at her more closely. "Artificial insemination, of course, unless you have objections." "No!" The word came too quickly, too forcefully. A slight flush colored her cheeks. His eyes narrowed. Years of business dealings had honed his ability to read people, and something about her reaction set off warning bells. "Ms. Brooks, is there something you haven't disclosed?" The flush deepened. She met his gaze steadily, but her knuckles went white where they gripped her purse. "I've been completely honest about my medical history and background." "That's not what I asked." A long moment passed. The city lights began to twinkle outside as dusk settled over Manhattan. Finally, Madeline took a deep breath. I've never..." She straightened her spine. "And I'm a virgin." The word hung in the air between them. Alexander felt something shift in his chest, an unexpected tightening that had nothing to do with business. "I see." His voice was even, betraying none of the sudden turmoil in his mind. "That wasn't in your file. It wasn't asked." A flash of defiance crossed her face. "It doesn't affect my ability to carry a child." "No, but it affects the terms of our arrangement." He stood, needing to move, to think. This changed everything. The clinical distance he'd carefully constructed around this transaction was suddenly, inexplicably threatened. "I'll need time to revise the contract." "Mr. Hayes." Madeline rose as well, her voice firm despite the color in her cheeks. "I need this money. My sister's medical bills." "I'm aware of your situation." He turned to face her, and for a moment, their eyes locked. Something electric passed between them. Something that had no place in a business arrangement. "I'll have my lawyers draw up new terms. We'll meet again tomorrow. Same time." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you for your consideration." As she walked to the door, Alexander found himself speaking again. "Ms. Brooks." She paused, looking back. "Why didn't you tell us from the beginning?" A sad smile touched her lips. "Would you have considered my application if I had?" The door closed softly behind her, leaving Alexander alone with the night sky and the unsettling realization that, for the first time in years, he wasn't sure what he wanted anymore. Madeline's hands shook as she unlocked the door to her small apartment in Queens. The subway ride home had been a blur, her mind replaying every moment of her meeting with Alexander Hayes. She'd practiced for hours how to present herself, confident, capable, professional. Never once had she imagined she'd end up confessing her most intimate secret to those penetrating dark eyes. "Maddie!" Lucy's voice drifted from their tiny kitchen. "You're home late." Guilt twisted in Madeline's stomach as she found her younger sister stirring a pot of mac and cheese. Lucy's medicine bottles lined the counter like silent accusations. The experimental treatments for her autoimmune condition cost more than their parents. Life insurance had left them, and even with 2 jobs, Madeline could barely keep up with the payments. "Just a long interview." Madeline forced a smile, remembering Hayes's warning about confidentiality. "How are you feeling?" "Better today." Lucy's bright smile didn't quite hide the shadows under her eyes. "Did you get the job?" "We'll see." Madeline hung up her blazer, the one she'd spent too much money on, desperate to look the part. "They're still considering candidates." She escaped to her bedroom before Lucy could ask more questions. Sinking onto her bed, she pulled out her phone and stared at the email that had arrived during her subway ride. New contract documents from Hayes Enterprises, with a note requesting her review before tomorrow's meeting. Her finger hovered over the attachment. Part of her wanted to delete it, to run as far as she could from those unsettling dark eyes and the way they seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls. But Lucy's medicine bottles flashed in her mind, along with the mounting pile of bills on her desk. Taking a deep breath, she opened the document. The legal language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out at her. Natural conception required. Private residence accommodations, minimum 6-month attempt period. Her heart thundered in her chest. He wanted. She couldn't even finish the thought. A soft knock interrupted her panic. "Maddie, I made enough for both of us." "Thanks, Lucy. I'll be right there." She locked her phone, trying to steady her breathing. Over dinner, she watched her sister pick at her food, noting how Lucy's wrists seemed thinner than last week. The experimental treatment was their last hope. Traditional medications had stopped working months ago. Without this new trial, Lucy's condition would continue to deteriorate. Later that night, after Lucy had gone to bed, Madeline sat at their small kitchen table with her laptop. The contract still waited in her email, its terms both terrifying and tempting. $5 million! Enough to pay for Lucy's entire treatment protocol, with plenty left over for her education and their future. All it would cost was everything Madeline had saved for someone special. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Have you reviewed the terms?" H. She stared at the message, remembering how his presence had filled that massive office, how his voice had softened almost imperceptibly when she'd made her confession. A man like Alexander Hayes could have chosen anyone. Why was he willing to complicate things by accepting someone like her? "Yes," she typed back. "Why did you change the method?" His response came quickly. "Some things shouldn't be clinical." Heat rushed to her face. Before she could overthink it, she typed, "Speaking from experience." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I prefer to maintain control of important situations. Of course he did. Everything about him screamed control, from his immaculate suit to his carefully measured words. But she'd seen something else in those brief moments when their eyes had met, a flash of vulnerability that matched her own. And if I agree, her heart pounded as she sent the message. Then we do this properly. A pause, then another message. I protect what's mine. Ms. Brooks, if you sign that contract, that includes you. The possessiveness in those words should have frightened her. Instead, an unexpected warmth bloomed in her chest. She thought of Lucy, of all the time she'd had to be the strong one since their parents' death. Maybe, just for a little while, it would be nice to let someone else carry that weight. Her fingers trembled as she typed her response. I'll sign. She sent the message before she could change her mind, then closed her laptop and went to the window. The city lights blurred through suddenly damp eyes. Tomorrow, she would walk into Hayes Enterprises and sign away her future to a man who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. But as she touched her phone, still warm from their exchange, she wondered if perhaps she'd seen something in Alexander Hayes that no contract could contain. A loneliness that matched her own, hidden behind walls of glass and steel. The elevator ride to Alexander Hayes's penthouse felt endless. Madeline clutched her small suitcase, watching the floor numbers tick upward. The signed contract weighed heavily in her purse, its terms now irrevocable. Move in immediately. The document had specified, maintain the appearance of a personal assistant, begin attempts at conception within the week. Her stomach lurched at that last thought. The elevator opened directly into a stunning foyer. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park, the late afternoon sun painting everything in gold. It was beautiful, imposing, and utterly soulless, like its owner. Ms. Brooks. Alexander's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him watching her from a doorway, his expression unreadable. He'd loosened his tie, and something about the slight dishevelment made him seem more human, more dangerous. Mr. Hayes. She was proud that her voice remained steady. Alexander, he corrected, moving closer. Given the circumstances, we should use first names. The circumstances. Such a clinical way to describe what they'd agreed to. Madeline, then. He nodded, then gestured to her suitcase. Is that all you brought? I have a few boxes being delivered tomorrow. She'd spent the morning packing, trying to explain to Lucy that this amazing new job required her to live on site. The lie had tasted bitter, but the excitement in her sister's eyes made it worthwhile. Your room is this way. He led her down a hallway, his shoulders tense beneath his tailored shirt. I had the housekeeper prepare it this morning. The bedroom was larger than her entire apartment, with its own sitting area and ensuite bathroom. A king-sized bed dominated the space, its pristine white duvet reflecting the dying sunlight. Madeline's cheeks heated as she realized she'd been staring at it too long. My room is at the other end of the penthouse, Alexander said quietly, watching her, until necessary. The air between them crackled with unspoken implications. Madeline set her suitcase down, needing to do something with her hands. When do I start my assistant duties? Tomorrow. He moved to the windows, adjusting the automated blinds. I've arranged for you to shadow my current assistant for a week before she leaves. The role isn't just a cover. I expect you to actually perform the job. Of course. She'd reviewed the additional contract outlining her responsibilities. I have experience in administrative work. I know. His eyes met hers in the window's reflection. I've read every line of your resume, Madeline, multiple times. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. Looking for red flags. Looking for you. He turned to face her, and for a moment his carefully constructed mask slipped. I needed to understand the kind of woman who would agree to this arrangement. And, she held his gaze, challenging him, what did you find? He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, like cedar and rain. Someone who carries too much on her shoulders. Someone who's never let anyone help her bear that weight. The accuracy of his assessment stole her breath. You don't know me. No. His hand rose, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch sent electricity racing down her spine. Your sister's medical records were in the background check. I know about the experimental treatment, the mounting bills. I know you haven't taken a day off in 3 years. I know you spend every spare penny on her care. Anger flared in her chest. Is that why you chose me? Because I was desperate. I chose you, he said softly. Because when my team suggested paying you extra to fast-track the process, you refused. You said you needed to think about it to be sure. Even desperate, you maintained your integrity. The anger faded, replaced by something more complicated. And my inexperience? Why didn't that disqualify me? Alexander's eyes darkened. His hand, still near her face, trembled slightly before dropping away. It should have. He stepped back, his mask sliding back into place. The housekeeper will bring dinner at 7. Feel free to settle in. He was at the door when she found her voice again. Alexander? He paused, his hand on the doorframe. Why do you really need an heir? The truth, not the corporate takeover story. For a long moment, he stood frozen. Then, without turning, some walls are better left standing, Madeline. Trust me on that. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Madeline sank onto the bed, her legs shaky. Outside, the sun finally set, casting long shadows across her new room. Somewhere in this massive, beautiful cage, Alexander Hayes was probably already regretting his choice, regretting the moment of weakness that had made him choose her. But she had seen beneath his mask, if only for a moment, had seen the loneliness there that mirrored her own, and despite every rational thought screaming against it, she wanted to see more. She wanted to tear down every wall he'd built, even if it meant her own came crumbling down in the process. Mr. Hayes's coffee needs to be ready exactly 7 minutes before he arrives, Patricia Collins explained, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the expensive coffee maker. 1 shot of espresso, filled with Colombian dark roast, no cream, no sugar. Madeline nodded, trying to focus on the endless list of instructions while ignoring the weight of Alexander's gaze from his office. He'd barely acknowledged her that morning, but she felt his attention like a physical touch every time she passed his door. His schedule is sacred, Patricia continued, pulling up a complex digital calendar. You'll need to master the art of saying no to people who think they're too important to be denied, including his brother. Madeline's hand stilled over her notebook. His brother? Half-brother, Patricia corrected with a slight grimace. Christopher Blake. He'll try to charm you, but don't fall for it. Mr. Hayes has strict instructions. No unscheduled visits. No calls put through without approval. Before Madeline could probe further, Alexander's voice came through the intercom. The quarterly reports. Patricia. That's our cue. Patricia gathered a stack of folders. Watch and learn. They entered Alexander's office to find him standing at the windows, his posture rigid. He turned as they approached, and Madeline's breath caught. The morning light carved shadows across his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away. The Q3 projections, Patricia said, laying out the folders. And the latest acquisition proposals. Thank you. He sat down, his movements precise. Madeline, you'll sit in on this meeting. You need to learn how these reports are structured. Her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. She took a seat beside Patricia, hyper-aware of his presence across the desk. For the next hour, she watched them work, noting how Patricia anticipated his needs, how Alexander processed information with ruthless efficiency. One last thing, Patricia said as they finished. Your brother called again about the charity gala. Alexander's pen stilled. No. He says your absence would raise questions. The press. I said no. His voice could have frozen flame. Patricia nodded, unfazed. I'll handle it. She stood, gathering her materials. Madeline, let's review the filing system. But Alexander's voice stopped them. Madeline stays. We need to discuss the Richardson contract. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly, but she left without comment. As the door closed, silence descended. Madeline's heart thundered in her chest. "There is no Richardson contract," she said quietly. "No," he set down his pen, finally meeting her eyes. "But we need to discuss tonight." Tonight, the word hung between them, heavy with meaning. According to their contract, they would have dinner together, begin the process of getting to know each other. "I've arranged for a private dinner here," he continued, his voice carefully neutral. 8 o'clock. "All right." She was proud that her voice remained steady. "Should I dress up?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Wear whatever makes you comfortable." "Is that what this is about?" she found herself asking. "Making me comfortable?" He stood abruptly, moving to the windows. "This arrangement needs to work, Madeline, for both our sakes. And if it doesn't—" She rose as well, drawn toward him like a magnet. "If we can't, we can." He turned, and suddenly the space between them felt charged. "That's what concerns me." Her breath caught at the intensity in his gaze. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I've built my life on control, on keeping everything in carefully defined boxes. But you—" His hand rose, hovering near her cheek without touching. "You make me want to tear down the walls." The confession hung in the air between them, startling in its honesty. Madeline's heart raced. Maybe some walls need to come down. His eyes darkened. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, straightening his tie. "Tonight," he said, his voice rough. 8 o'clock. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and fled to the safety of her desk. But she could feel his eyes on her through the glass walls of his office, and when she finally dared to look up, the hunger in his gaze made her shiver. Tonight couldn't come soon enough, and that terrified her more than anything. As she tried to focus on learning the filing system, her phone buzzed with a text from Lucy. "How's the new job? Is your boss as scary as everyone says?" Madeline stared at the message, thinking of Alexander's carefully constructed walls, of the vulnerability she'd glimpsed beneath his control. "No," she typed back. "He's not scary. He's lonely." She deleted the message before sending it, responding instead with a bland reassurance about the job. But as she glanced toward his office, she caught him watching her again, his expression unguarded for just a moment. And in that moment, she saw everything he was trying to hide, the longing, the fear, the desperate need for connection he'd buried beneath years of control. Tonight, some of those walls would come down. She just prayed they both survived the fall. Madeline stood before the mirror in her bedroom, second-guessing her choice of dress for the third time. The deep blue silk fell softly to her knees, elegant without being overtly seductive. But nothing about this evening felt simple. "Wear whatever makes you comfortable," he'd said, as if anything about this situation could be comfortable. Her phone buzzed with another text from Lucy. "You're working late again, second night in a row." Guilt twisted in her stomach as she typed back, "Big project. Don't wait up." The lies were getting easier, which somehow made them worse. At precisely 8 o'clock, she made her way to the penthouse's formal dining room. Alexander stood at the window, backlit by the city lights, a glass of wine in his hand. He'd changed from his business suit into dark slacks and a cream-colored sweater that softened his usual sharp edges. The sight made her breath catch. He turned at her entrance, and something flickered in his eyes. "You look beautiful." The simple honesty in his voice warmed her cheeks. "Thank you. So do. You look nice, too." She winced at her awkwardness, but a hint of a smile touched his lips as he crossed to her, offering a glass of wine. "Nervous? Shouldn't I be?" She accepted the glass, their fingers brushing. The contact sent electricity up her arm. "Yes," he said quietly. "We both should be." Before she could respond, the private elevator chimed and a waitress emerged with their first course. Alexander had arranged for a full-service dinner, she realized, his way of maintaining some formality, some control over the evening. They sat across from each other at the massive dining table, the space between them feeling both too large and not large enough. The soup was probably excellent, but Madeline barely tasted it. "Tell me about your sister," Alexander said suddenly. She looked up, surprised. "Why?" "Because she's important to you." He set down his spoon, studying her. "And because I'd rather know about your family than have you wonder about mine." The deflection was subtle but clear. Still, she found herself talking about Lucy, her passion for art, her struggle with illness, her unflagging optimism despite everything. Alexander listened intently, asking occasional questions that showed he was genuinely paying attention. As their entrees arrived, he said, "You've been her guardian since your parents died." "Yes." Madeline sipped her wine, needing the fortification. "I was 22. Lucy was 17. That's a heavy burden for someone so young." "It wasn't a burden," she said sharply. "It was love." Something raw flashed across his face. "The two aren't mutually exclusive." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Madeline set down her fork. "Is that why you push everyone away? Because love feels like a burden?" "I push people away because they prove themselves untrustworthy." His voice was cold, but his hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wine. "My former fiancé taught me that lesson thoroughly." "Tell me," she said softly. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, she was carrying my child, or so she claimed, until I discovered she'd been sleeping with my brother. The pregnancy was a lie, designed to force a quick marriage before the inheritance clause activated." Madeline's heart ached at the raw pain in his voice. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." He stood abruptly, moving to the window. "It taught me a valuable lesson about mixing business with emotion." "Is that what this is?" She followed him, drawn by the tension in his shoulders. "Just business." He turned, and suddenly they were too close. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "You know it's not." "Then what is it?" Instead of answering, he reached out, his fingers tracing her cheek with aching gentleness. Madeline's eyes fluttered closed at the contact. His thumb brushed her lower lip, and she couldn't contain her small gasp. "We should wait," he whispered, but he didn't move away. "Why?" She opened her eyes to find his face inches from hers, his control visibly fraying. "Because once I kiss you, everything changes." His voice was rough. "Once I touch you, there's no going back to contracts and business arrangements." "Maybe I don't want to go back." She swayed closer, drawn by the heat of him. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending this is just a transaction." His other hand came up to cradle her face. "Madeline." Her name was a warning, a prayer. "Alexander." She reached up, touching his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her palm. "Stop thinking so much." For a moment, he remained frozen. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, he closed the distance between them. His lips found hers, gentle at first, then increasingly desperate. Madeline melted into him, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair as the kiss deepened. He tasted like wine and possibility, like danger and safety all at once. His hand slid down to her waist, pulling her closer, and she felt the last of his control shatter as she pressed against him. The sound of breaking glass startled them apart. They turned to find the waitress in the doorway, staring at a shattered wineglass at her feet. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hayes. I'll clean this up immediately." Reality crashed back in. Alexander stepped away, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "That will be all for tonight," he said, his voice hoarse. "Please see yourself out." As the waitress hurried to clean up and leave, Madeline touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss. Everything had changed in an instant, just as he'd warned. There was no going back now. "Madeline." She looked up to find him watching her, his eyes dark with want and warning. "We should say good night." She nodded, not trusting her voice. But as she turned to leave, his hand caught hers. "Tomorrow," he said roughly, "have dinner with me again." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." She fled to her room, her heart racing. Behind her closed door, she pressed her fingers to her lips again, remembering the taste of him, the feel of his hands on her waist. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, clean and simple. But nothing about Alexander Hayes was simple, and nothing about their arrangement was ever going to be clean. The morning after their kiss, the Hayes Enterprises office felt like a minefield. Madeline delivered Alexander's coffee precisely 7 minutes before his arrival, her fingers trembling slightly as she set it on his desk. When he walked in moments later, the electricity between them was almost visible. "Good morning," she managed, proud of how professional she sounded. "Morning." His voice was gruff, his eyes lingering on her lips before he quickly looked away. "The Chen portfolio needs to be reviewed before the 10 o'clock. And just like that, they were back to business. Except nothing felt like business anymore. Not the way his presence filled the room, not the heat that flooded her cheeks when their fingers brushed as she handed him documents, not the loaded silence that fell whenever they were alone. Mid-morning, Patricia's replacement training was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Well, a smooth voice drawled from the elevator. "The rumors are true. My brother has found himself a new assistant." Madeline looked up to find a man who could only be Christopher Blake, studying her with open interest. He had Alexander's height, but none of his intensity. Where Alexander was all sharp edges and controlled power, Christopher was casual grace and practiced charm. "Mr. Blake." She stood, remembering Patricia's warnings. "I'm afraid Mr. Hayes is in a meeting." "He's always in a meeting," Christopher smiled, moving closer. "Especially when I come by. I'm Christopher, by the way, though I'm sure you've heard all about me." "Mr. Hayes' schedule is fully booked today," she said firmly. "I can help you make an appointment." Now. He leaned against her desk, too close for comfort. "Surely we can be less formal. After all, we're practically family, given how much time you'll be spending with my brother." The insinuation in his tone made her skin crawl. Before she could respond, Alexander's office door opened. "Get away from her." His voice was deadly quiet. Christopher straightened, his smile never wavering. "Brother, I was just introducing myself to your lovely new assistant. Get out." Alexander moved to stand between them, his body radiating tension. "Now that's not very brotherly." Christopher's eyes narrowed. "Especially given our father's wishes about family unity. Speaking of which, the charity gala—" "If you want to discuss father's wishes," Alexander cut in, "we can do it through the lawyers. Now leave, before I have security remove you." Something ugly flashed across Christopher's face. "You can't hide forever, Alexander. Sooner or later, you'll have to face me and the truth about what really happened that night." The color drained from Alexander's face. Christopher smirked, then turned to Madeline with a mock bow. "Lovely meeting you, my dear. Do ask my brother about our father sometime. I'm sure he'll tell you such interesting stories." The elevator doors closed behind him, leaving a heavy silence. Alexander stood frozen, his hands clenched into fists. "Alexander!" Madeline touched his arm gently. "Are you—" He jerked away. "Cancel my meetings for the next hour. No calls." She watched helplessly as he stalked into his office, slamming the door. Through the glass walls, she saw him pour himself a drink, something he never did during work hours. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ask him about the fire. Ask him why he really needs an heir so badly. See. Madeline's hand shook as she deleted the message. When she looked up, Alexander was watching her through the glass, his expression haunted. Their eyes met, and all the progress they'd made, all the walls they'd started to break down, seemed to rebuild themselves in an instant. She thought of their kiss, of the vulnerability he'd shown at dinner. Now he was back behind his walls, stronger than ever. But she'd seen what lay beneath, had tasted it, felt it in the desperate way he'd held her. Making a decision, she grabbed 2 coffee cups and entered his office without knocking. He didn't look up as she set them down and closed the door. "I don't want company." "I know." She poured coffee into both cups. "But you need it." "Madeline." His voice held a warning. "No." She moved around his desk to face him. "You don't get to shut down. Not after last night. Not with me." He finally met her eyes, and the pain there took her breath away. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." She touched his face, feeling him tremble. "Whatever it is, whatever happened, let me help carry it." For a long moment he remained still. Then, slowly, He leaned into her touch. "I can't," he whispered. "If I tell you, if you knew, try me." She stepped closer between his knees, cradling his face in both hands. "I'm stronger than you think." His hands came up to grip her waist, and suddenly she was in his lap, his face buried in her neck. She held him as tremors ran through his body, stroking his hair, offering silent comfort. "Tonight," he said finally, his voice muffled against her skin. "After dinner, I'll tell you everything." She pressed a kiss to his temple, sealing the promise. Whatever demons haunted Alexander Hayes, whatever secrets lay buried in his past, she would face them with him, even if it destroyed them both. Dinner sat untouched between them. Alexander stood at the windows of his penthouse, a glass of scotch in his hand, watching night settle over Manhattan. Madeline waited silently, knowing he needed to find his own way to the truth. "I was 17, he finally said, his voice rough. "When I found out about Christopher's existence, my father's perfect secret, a whole second family hidden away in Boston." He took a drink, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. "I was angry. Furious that he'd betrayed my mother, that he'd lied to us for years, but mostly I was afraid. Christopher was older than me by 8 months. Technically, he was the firstborn son." Madeline's heart squeezed at the pain in his voice. "What happened?" "I confronted my father in his study. He'd been drinking. He did that a lot near the end." Alexander's knuckles went white around his glass. "He told me it didn't matter, that Christopher would never inherit. He'd made sure of it. The company, the fortune, everything would go to me." But something went wrong. Christopher's mother found out she'd been cut out. She threatened to go public with the affair. He closed his eyes. My father panicked. He decided to change the will, to acknowledge Christopher. But first, he needed to destroy the evidence of the original will and all the documents proving he'd deliberately hidden Christopher's existence. Thunder rumbled outside, a storm rolling in. Alexander's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He was burning the papers in the fireplace when I found him. We argued. He was drunk, shoving more documents into the flames. I tried to stop him, tried to save something, anything that would protect my inheritance." Rain began to pelt the windows as Alexander turned to face her. The fire spread so quickly. 1 minute we were fighting over papers. The next, the whole study was in flames. I tried to help him out, but he was too drunk, too confused. He kept going back for the safe, for more documents. "Oh, Alexander!" Madeline rose, drawn to the anguish in his face. "I got him to the door," he continued, the words spilling out now. "But he shoved me away, went back in one last time. The ceiling collapsed. I couldn't—" His voice broke. "The investigators ruled it an accident. Drunk man, careless with fire. But Christopher knew. He was there that night, watched it all happen from the garden. He's held it over me ever since." "It wasn't your fault," Madeline said firmly, reaching for him. He caught her hands, his grip desperate. "You don't understand. I could have saved him if I hadn't been so focused on the damn inheritance, if I just grabbed him and dragged him out." "You were 17, she whispered, freeing one hand to touch his face. "You were just a boy trying to protect what was yours." And now, his eyes searched hers, filled with self-loathing. "What kind of man am I now, using you to protect it again? Is that really why you chose me?" She held his gaze. "Because of the inheritance?" He shook his head slowly. "No, God help me. No. From the moment I saw your file, there was something about you, something real in a world of lies and manipulation. I told myself it was just business, just protection against Christopher's claims. But, instead of answering, he kissed her. Unlike their first kiss, this one was gentle, almost reverent. His hands trembled as they framed her face, as though she were something precious he feared breaking. When they parted, tears shone in his eyes. "I don't deserve this, you, any of it. That's not your decision to make." She pressed closer, refusing to let him retreat. "I choose what I deserve, and I choose you, not your money, not your inheritance. You." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the raw hope in his expression. "Even knowing what I've done?" "Especially knowing." She took his glass, set it aside, and twined their fingers together. "You've carried this alone for so long. Let me help you bear it." A sob caught in his throat. She pulled him close, feeling the tension finally break as years of guilt and grief poured out of him. They sank to the floor together, his head in her lap as she stroked his hair, murmuring soft words of comfort while the storm raged outside. Later, when his tears had dried and they lay tangled together on the couch, watching the rain, he spoke again. "Christopher's ultimatum expires in 6 months. Without an heir, he gets everything. Not just the money, but control of the company. He'll destroy everything I've built, everything my father built before me. We won't let that happen." Madeline traced his jaw with gentle fingers. "But Alexander, when we have this baby, it won't be because of Christopher or the inheritance. It will be because we choose it, because we choose each other." He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "I don't know how to do this, how to be open, vulnerable." "Yes, you do," she smiled softly. "You're doing it right now." Thunder rumbled again, more distant now. Alexander pulled her closer, his heartbeat steady under her ear. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered. "Not for the contract, not for the heir, just stay." Madeline lifted her head, saw the fear and hope warring in his eyes. "Yes," she said simply, and kissed him. Outside, the storm began to clear, stars peeking through breaks in the clouds. But neither of them noticed, too lost in each other, in the healing power of truth finally spoken, of walls finally broken. For the first time in his life, Alexander Hayes fell asleep with his heart unguarded, his secrets shared, his burden halved by love. Madeline woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the unfamiliar weight of an arm draped across her waist. For a moment, she held perfectly still, taking in the warmth of Alexander's body curved around hers, the steady rhythm of his breathing against her neck. They hadn't made love last night. Instead, they'd talked until exhaustion overtook them, sharing pieces of themselves that had never seen daylight. She'd told him about the night her parents died, about holding Lucy through endless nights of pain. He'd spoken of his mother's withdrawal after his father's death, of years spending Christmas alone in empty mansions. "You're thinking too loud," Alexander murmured against her hair, his voice rough with sleep. She smiled, threading her fingers through his where they rested on her stomach. "Sorry. Professional habit. Personal assistants have to think ahead." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with an expression that made her heart skip. Morning light softened his features, turning his usually sharp edges golden. "You're not my assistant right now." "No." She turned to face him, breath catching at the intensity in his eyes. "What am I, then?" Instead of answering, he kissed her. Morning breath be damned. She melted into him, savoring the unhurried exploration of his lips, the gentle slide of his hands into her hair. The spell broke when her phone buzzed insistently from the floor where she'd dropped her clothes last night. Lucy's name flashed on the screen. "I have to take this." She sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "Lucy, what's wrong?" Her sister's voice came through, shaky and weak. "Maddie, I don't feel so good. The new treatment, something's wrong." Madeline's blood ran cold. "Where are you?" "Mount Sinai. They admitted me an hour ago. I didn't want to worry you, but—" Lucy broke off in a fit of coughing. "I'm coming right now." Madeline was already reaching for her clothes, panic clawing at her throat. "Just hold on, okay?" She ended the call to find Alexander already dressed, car keys in hand. "I'll drive you, but your meetings can wait." He tossed her one of his sweaters, impossibly soft against her skin. "Family comes first." The words, so simply stated, brought tears to her eyes. She blinked them back, focusing on getting dressed. Within minutes, they were in his private elevator. The drive to Mount Sinai was a blur of worried silence and running red lights. Alexander's hand never left hers, his thumb tracing soothing circles on her palm. They found Lucy in the emergency department, pale and small against stark white sheets. "Miss Brooks," a doctor approached, tablet in hand. "I'm Dr. Chen." Your sister had a severe reaction to the experimental treatment. We've stabilized her, but what? Madeline gripped Alexander's hand harder. The trial drug has caused complications. She'll need to discontinue the treatment immediately. Dr. Chen's expression was grave. Unfortunately, this also disqualifies her from future experimental protocols. So what are our options? Alexander's voice was calm, steadying. Dr. Chen glanced between them. There's a promising treatment in Switzerland, but it's extremely expensive and not covered by any insurance. How much? Madeline asked, even as her heart sank. The full course, including hospital stay and aftercare, around $3 million. The room spun slightly. Even with Alexander's contract, she wouldn't have access to that kind of money for months. Set it up, Alexander said firmly. Have your office send the paperwork to Hayes Enterprises. We'll handle all costs. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose, but she nodded and left to make arrangements. Madeline turned to Alexander, overwhelmed. I can't let you... Yes, you can. He cupped her face in his hands. Let me do this. Not because of our arrangement, not because of any contract, because I love you. The words hung between them, unexpected and absolute. Madeline's heart stuttered. What? I love you. His voice was rough with emotion. I think I have since that first night in my office, when you looked me in the eye and told me the truth. Let me help the person you love most in the world. Please. She kissed him then, not caring who saw, pouring all her fear and gratitude and overwhelming love into the contact. When they parted, his eyes were suspiciously bright. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. Someone cleared their throat behind them. They turned to find Christopher standing in the doorway, his expression calculating. How touching. His smile was razor-sharp. Brother dear, the board is looking for you. Something about unauthorized fund transfers and emotional entanglements with employees. Alexander stiffened. You didn't. Oh, but I did. Christopher's eyes gleamed. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate your new assistant? The board is very interested in your sudden personal investment in an employee's family medical care. Almost as interested as they are in the real nature of your relationship. Get out! Alexander's voice could have frozen hell. Gladly. Christopher straightened his cuffs. But you might want to check your phone. The emergency board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Don't be late. There's talk of a vote of no confidence. He sauntered out, leaving devastation in his wake. Alexander's phone was already buzzing with messages. Go, Madeline said softly. I'll stay with Lucy. He looked torn, his hand tightening on hers. Madeline, go save your company. She managed a weak smile. We'll be here when you get back. He kissed her hard, then pressed his forehead to hers. I meant what I said. All of it. I know. She pushed him gently toward the door. Go. She watched him leave, her heart heavy with fear, not for herself or the money, but for him. Christopher had just weaponized their love, turned it into ammunition against everything Alexander had built. Turning back to Lucy's bed, she found her sister watching through half-closed eyes. So, Lucy whispered, want to tell me what that was all about? Madeline sank into the chair beside her, still wearing Alexander's sweater, surrounded by his scent. It's a long story. Good thing I'm not going anywhere. Lucy's weak smile was knowing. Start with the part where you fell in love with your boss. Outside the hospital window, storm clouds gathered again. Madeline held her sister's hand and began to tell the truth, all of it. Because love, she was learning, couldn't survive in darkness. It needed light to grow, even when that light revealed uncomfortable truths. She just prayed Alexander's truth wouldn't cost him everything he'd fought to protect. The Hayes Enterprises boardroom had always felt like Alexander's natural habitat until now. 14 pairs of eyes watched him with varying degrees of judgment as Christopher finished his presentation. So you see, Christopher's smooth voice carried perfectly, my brother has not only entered into an inappropriate relationship with an employee, but has authorized millions in unauthorized medical payments for her family member. This clear breach of corporate governance. That's enough. Alexander's quiet voice cut through the room like a blade. "You've had your say, Christopher. Now it's my turn." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket, the spare he kept in his office, still creased from being hastily donned. The morning's peace with Madeline felt like a distant dream. "Yes, I authorized medical payments for Lucy Brooks. Yes, I am in a relationship with Madeline Brooks." The admission caused a ripple of murmurs. "But what my brother hasn't told you is why he's really here." Alexander pulled up an email on the boardroom screen. "This is from our father's personal account, dated the night he died. In it, he details his plan to revise the will to include Christopher, not out of love or recognition, but because of blackmail." Christopher's face went pale. "You can't prove." "Actually, I can." Alexander's voice was steel. "The fire destroyed many documents, but not all. I've spent years collecting evidence, building a case. Would the board like to hear about the money Christopher's mother embezzled from Hayes' subsidiaries, or perhaps about his own attempts to sabotage company projects?" The boardroom erupted in chaos. Alexander remained standing, his eyes locked on his brother's increasingly desperate face. "I've protected you for years, Christopher, protected father's memory, but I won't let you destroy what he built. Not anymore." "Mr. Hayes," Regina Walsh, the head of the board, spoke up. "These are serious allegations. We'll need time to review." "Take all the time you need." Alexander's smile was razor sharp. "My lawyers will provide full documentation. But first, I have a hospital to return to." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Christopher, the inheritance clause you're so fond of threatening me with, check the fine print. Father's original will specified legitimate heir. Your mother never divorced her first husband. Legally, you're not even a Hayes." The look of stunned comprehension on Christopher's face was almost worth everything else. Across town, in a quiet hospital room, Madeline finished telling Lucy everything. Her sister's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, understanding. "So let me get this straight," Lucy said weakly. You agreed to have a baby with your billionaire boss, fell in love with him instead, and now his evil half-brother is trying to destroy everything." "That's a surprisingly accurate summary." Madeline managed a small laugh. "And the medical payments he just authorized? He did that because he loves me." Madeline's voice caught, "Not because of any contract." Lucy was quiet for a long moment. "You know what this means, right? When the press gets hold of this story, and they will, you'll be painted as a gold digger, the ambitious assistant who seduced her boss." "I know." Madeline's hands twisted in her lap. "But that's not the worst part. The contract, if it becomes public, it could destroy him. The board would never accept a CEO who tried to buy an heir. Then don't let it become public." Lucy's voice was stronger now. "Leave." Madeline's head snapped up. "What? Break the contract? Walk away? Let him say he fired you for inappropriate behavior, or whatever story protects his position." Lucy reached for her hand. "You love him enough to set him free." "I can't." "Yes, you can." Lucy squeezed her fingers. "He's already authorized my treatment. I'll be okay, but his whole life's work is at stake. Sometimes love means making the hard choice." Tears burned in Madeline's eyes as the truth of her sister's words sank in. She thought of Alexander in that boardroom, fighting for everything he'd built, thought of how the scandal would follow him, taint every business deal, every achievement. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "On my way back. I love you." Her heart shattered as she typed back, "Don't come. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." Then she turned off her phone, pressed a kiss to Lucy's forehead, and walked out of the hospital room. Each step felt like walking on broken glass, but she forced herself forward. Love meant making the hard choice, even if that choice was walking away from the only man she'd ever truly loved. In the elevator of Hayes Enterprises, Alexander read her message, his earlier victory turning to ashes in his mouth. His phone rang. Regina Walsh. "The board has reviewed your evidence," she said without preamble. "They're satisfied. Your position is secure, contingent on one thing." "What's that?" His voice was hollow. "And whatever's going on with Miss Brooks, officially, professionally, and personally, the company can't afford this kind of scandal." Alexander stared at Madeline's message. Understanding dawning. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known exactly what it would take to protect him, his company, his legacy. She'd chosen to break both their hearts to save him. "Mr. Hayes," Regina prompted. "Your answer." He closed his eyes, grief warring with desperate love. "I'll take care of it." But even as he said the words, he was already forming a different plan, because sometimes love meant making the hard choice, and sometimes it meant fighting like hell to prove all the choices wrong. 2 weeks of silence felt like an eternity. Madeline threw herself into caring for Lucy at the private Swiss clinic, trying not to think about the life she'd left behind. The European press had been mercifully quiet about her departure from Hayes Enterprises. Alexander's influence, no doubt, protecting her even now. Lucy was improving daily under the new treatment protocol, her color returning, her smile growing stronger, but her eyes followed Madeline with worry as her sister moved through their days like a ghost. "You should call him," Lucy said one morning, watching Madeline stare unseeing at the clinic's pristine gardens. "I can't." Madeline's voice was hollow. "The board made their position clear. His company has to come first. Since when do you let old men in suits decide your life?" Before Madeline could respond, her phone buzzed, a news alert she hadn't been able to bring herself to disable. Hayes Enterprises CEO announces major restructuring. Alexander Hayes to step down as CEO, transition to executive chairman role. Her hands shook as she read the article. Alexander was restructuring the entire company, creating a new governance model that separated the CEO role from the Hayes family holdings. He would retain control of the family assets, but surrender daily operational control to a new chief executive. "Maddie!" Lucy's voice seemed far away. "What's wrong?" "He's stepping down." The words felt unreal. "He's giving up the CEO position." "Good." Lucy's firm tone made Madeline look up. "Now maybe you'll stop being an idiot and go back to him. It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." Lucy struggled to sit up straighter, her face fierce. "You left to protect his company. He's restructuring that company to protect your relationship. Seems pretty simple to me." A soft knock interrupted them. A nurse entered with a large envelope. "Special delivery for Ms. Brooks." Madeline opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, their original contract, torn in half. Wrapped around it was a note in Alexander's precise handwriting. "Some contracts are made to be broken. Some walls need to fall. Come home, please." "Well," Lucy demanded, "what are you waiting for?" "But your treatment is paid for, is working, and has an excellent medical team." Lucy threw a pillow at her. "Go get your man, you idiot." Madeline's laugh caught on a sob. She hugged her sister fiercely, then ran to pack. But when she arrived at JFK 18 hours later, exhausted and emotional, it wasn't Alexander waiting at arrivals. It was Christopher. "He doesn't know you're here." His smile was all false sympathy. "And he won't want to see you when he learns what I've discovered." Madeline's heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" "Your parents' accident." Christopher's eyes glittered. "The one caused by corporate greed. Guess which company owned the truck that killed them?" The world tilted sideways. "No." "Oh, yes." He pulled out a file. Hayes Enterprises subsidiary. Alexander's first acquisition as CEO. Actually, he buried the connection, paid off investigators. He's known all along who was responsible for their death. Madeline's legs gave out. She sank onto a nearby bench, the truth crushing her chest. He knew." "Adds quite a twist to your love story, doesn't it?" Christopher's voice dripped false concern. "The grieving daughter, falling for the man responsible for making her an orphan. It'll make quite the headline." "Why are you doing this?" "Because he took everything from me." Christopher's mask slipped, showing raw hatred. "Now I'm taking everything from him, starting with you." He walked away, leaving the file in her lap. Madeline stared at it, her vision blurring with tears. After everything, the trust they'd built, the walls they'd broken down, Alexander had kept this from her. Her phone buzzed. Alexander. Patricia said you took a flight home. Where are you? She looked at the message through her tears, remembering his father's death, the guilt he still carried. Had he hidden this truth to protect her, the way he'd hidden his father's death to protect the company? Or had it all been manipulation from the start? Madeline, his voice. She looked up to find him striding through the terminal, his face lighting up at the sight of her. But he stopped short when he saw her tears, the file in her hands. Did you know? Her voice broke on the words. About my parents. The color drained from his face. Madeline, did you know? The terminal seemed to hold its breath as Alexander Hayes, for the first time in his life, faced a truth he couldn't control or contain. Yes, he whispered. I knew. The private lounge at JFK felt like a confessional, with its dim lighting and hushed atmosphere. Madeline sat rigid on the leather couch, the damning file open between them, while Alexander paced like a caged animal. I found out 3 days after I met you, he said finally, his voice raw. When the background check came back, I recognized the accident details, had them pull the old files and... He stopped, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I should have told you immediately, but you didn't. Madeline's voice was eerily calm, belying the storm in her heart. You let me fall in love with you instead. Yes, no excuses, no justifications, just the truth, hanging heavy between them. Why? Alexander turned to the window, his reflection fractured in the rain-streaked glass. Because I'm a coward. The admission seemed torn from him. Because the moment I saw you in my office, something in me came alive. And I knew if I told you the truth, I'd lose you before I ever really had you. So you lied, by omission. He faced her, his eyes haunted, like I lied about my father's death for years. Like I've lied about so many things, thinking I was protecting people, protecting myself. His laugh was bitter. I've spent my whole life hiding from truth, Madeline, until you came along and made me want to be better. She stood, needing to move, to think. Did you buy my silence? Is that what the contract was really about? No! The force of his denial made her jump. God, no. The contract, I needed an heir. Yes. But I chose you because you were different, real. I thought if I could just keep this one truth hidden, like your father kept Christopher hidden. The parallel struck her suddenly, like he hid his lies until they destroyed him. Alexander flinched as if she'd struck him. I'm becoming him, aren't I? Everything I swore I'd never be. The broken acknowledgement cracked something in Madeline's chest. She thought of her parents, of the years she'd spent hating faceless corporations for their death, but hate was easy. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, was harder. Show me, she said quietly. What? Show me everything. The accident reports, the investigation, the cover-up, all of it. She met his eyes. If you want any chance of saving us, show me the whole truth. No more walls. For a moment, he stood frozen. Then he pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the keys. I'm sending Patricia everything from the sealed files. It'll take her an hour to gather it all. Then we wait. Madeline sank back onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. And you tell me everything you've been hiding, starting with why you really need an heir. Alexander's breath caught. Madeline. Everything, Alexander, or we're done. He closed his eyes, nodded once, and began to speak. He told her about the real inheritance clause, not just about control of the company, but about a second will his father had hidden, a will that would donate the entire Hayes fortune to charity if Alexander didn't produce an heir by 40, not because of Christopher, but because his father had seen the loneliness in his son, the walls he'd built too high. He knew I'd end up alone, Alexander said softly. Knew I'd choose the company over love, every time. The clause wasn't about keeping the money in the family. It was his last attempt to force me to let someone in. And instead of letting someone in naturally, you tried to buy your way around it. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Until I met you. He knelt before her, not touching, but close enough she could feel his warmth. "You weren't part of the plan, Madeline. You were the first real thing in my life, and I ruined it by trying to control it, just like I tried to control everything." A soft knock interrupted them. Patricia, with a laptop and stack of files, she set them down without a word and left, closing the door behind her. For the next 2 hours, they went through everything. The accident investigation, showing how a Hayes Enterprises truck's faulty brakes had caused the crash. The corporate cover-up, executed by mid-level managers trying to protect quarterly profits. Alexander's discovery of the truth years later, his private payments to the investigating officers to keep it quiet. "One last thing," he said hoarsely, pulling up a bank statement. "Every month since I found out, I've been depositing money in a foundation. It's in your parents' names, funding research into automotive safety systems." His voice broke. "It doesn't make up for anything, but—" "Stop!" Madeline's vision blurred with tears. "Just stop trying to fix everything with money. Then tell me how to fix it." His hands shook as they hovered near hers. "Tell me how to make this right." She looked at him, really looked at him, saw the scared 17-year-old boy who couldn't save his father, saw the lonely man who'd built his walls so high he'd forgotten how to live without them, saw the person she'd fallen in love with, flaws and all. "You can't fix the past," she said finally. "No one can, but you can choose to stop letting it control your future." She took his hands, feeling them tremble in hers. "We both can. What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to hear about this foundation, want to help make it something that truly honors my parents." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm saying I'm tired of letting grief and guilt rule our lives." "Aren't you?" Alexander's breath hitched. Slowly, reverently, he brought their joined hands to his lips. "Help me tear down these walls," he whispered against her skin. "All of them. Please." Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, but inside their private sanctuary, something else was breaking too. Old patterns, old fears, old guilt. And in their place, something new began to grow, something real. 1 year later, the Hayes Foundation's annual gala buzzed with energy as Madeline stood at the podium, her voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes watching her. 1 year ago, this foundation was just a secret account, born from guilt and hidden behind corporate walls. Today, it's helped implement new safety standards in over 50 transportation companies, funded research into breakthrough brake systems, and provided support for families affected by automotive accidents. She paused, feeling Alexander's presence behind her, solid and sure. "My parents died because of corporate negligence. For years, I let that define me, let grief build walls around my heart." Her hand drifted to her slightly rounded belly, visible even in her elegant gown. "But sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing to break down those walls, to turn pain into purpose." The audience applauded as she stepped back, letting Alexander take her place. He looked different now, lighter, somehow, as if setting down his burdens had physically transformed him. "When my father died," he began, his voice carrying through the ballroom, "I thought I had to choose between love and legacy. I spent years building walls to protect what I thought mattered, never realizing I was just copying his mistakes." He turned to Madeline, his eyes soft, "Until someone brave enough to tell the truth showed me a better way." From her seat in the front row, Lucy beamed at them both, her own recovery evident in her bright eyes and healthy glow. Beside her sat Regina Walsh, who had surprised everyone by becoming one of their strongest allies once the truth came out. "Hayes Enterprises is no longer just a company," Alexander continued. "Through this foundation, through our new corporate governance structure, we're building something different, something real." The words echoed their private conversation from a year ago, making Madeline's heart swell. She remembered that night in the airport lounge when they'd chosen truth over comfort, love over fear. The months that followed hadn't been easy. The press had eventually gotten hold of their story, but they'd faced it together, telling their truth before anyone could twist it. Christopher had tried one last time to destroy them, threatening to reveal everything to the shareholders. But truth, they'd discovered, was the best defense against manipulation. When Alexander voluntarily disclosed their history to the board, all of it, from the contract to the accident to the foundation, Christopher's weapons had crumbled to dust. The last Madeline had heard, he'd moved to Europe, finally free of his own obsession with the Hayes legacy. And now, Alexander's voice drew her back to the present. I'd like to announce the Foundation's newest initiative. He gestured for her to join him at the podium. The Lucy Brooks Scholarship for Medical Research, funding innovative treatments for autoimmune diseases. Lucy's gasp of surprise was audible even over the applause. Madeline squeezed her sister's shoulder as she passed, remembering all the nights they'd spent in that Swiss clinic, healing in more ways than one. Together, Alexander concluded, his hand finding Madeline's, we're building a different kind of legacy. Not one of secrets and control, but of truth and transformation. Later, as they swayed together during the first dance, Madeline felt their baby move. Alexander's hand splayed protectively over her stomach, his touch full of wonder. He's strong, he murmured, like his mother. She, Madeline corrected with a smile. And yes, she is. She looked up at him, seeing not the controlled CEO or the wounded son, but simply the man she loved. Are you ready for this? For all of it. The baby, the foundation, letting go of control. His smile was tender. I'm not sure anyone's ever really ready, but I'm not afraid anymore. He kissed her softly. You taught me that love is stronger than fear, and you taught me that it's never too late to start over. She rested her head on his chest, hearing his steady heartbeat, to choose a different ending. Not an ending, he corrected. A beginning. Across the room, Lucy was dancing with her new research partner, her laugh carrying over the music. The Foundation's latest safety initiative reports sat in Alexander's office, showing lives saved and accidents prevented. And in the center of it all they danced, two people who had found each other despite their walls, because of their walls, and ultimately beyond them. I love you, Alexander whispered against her hair. Every real, imperfect, beautiful part of you. Madeline smiled, thinking of contracts torn and rewritten, of truths faced and fears conquered. I love you too, all of you. No conditions, no walls, no fear. Above them, through the ballroom's glass ceiling, stars sparkled in the clear night sky, but neither of them looked up. They had everything they needed right here, in their truth, in their trust, in their love. Some things, after all, were stronger than glass and steel. Some things could break every wall ever built. Love was one of them, and they had finally learned to let it in. The end. Thanks for watching to the end. Did you like the story? Tell us what you thought in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe now for more exciting stories you won't want to miss. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. See you in the next story. See you there.